So if you're new to the channel, about a year ago, I took this 71 Cutlass in to pretty much just get running and get out on the road. And slowly that tumbled and turned into a complete restoration on this 71 Cutlass. Now, I am super glad that we did that because once we got this car all the way down to metal, we realized there were so many different paint jobs on this car. And not only that, there was lots and lots of rust that was hiding from us. So now fast forwarding a year, we have come a long way. The car has been completely sandblasted. All of the metal work has been finished. The patches have all been finished. All of our dents were fixed. We fine-tuned all of our gaps to make them perfect. And then in the last episode, we actually started building these custom hood scoops for the Cutlass. Now, we were kind of trying to go after a 442 hood look on this Cutlass, but the problem is this Cutlass hood is so different than the 442 hood, we just couldn't make it work. Now I'll show you why the hood scoops didn't turn out the way we wanted in just a second. But just to remind you guys the deadline of this car, I'm really pushing to get this car done this year. So I rented out a booth and it is for a specific day towards the end of February. And so I have to have this car completely finished, completely torn apart and ready to go by the end of February to make this appointment. So I still have a ton of little stuff to do in this episode, and then hopefully we can get to taking apart this car and getting it ready for epoxy. Now let me show you guys why these hood scoops didn't turn out the way we wanted to and why we pretty much pulled the plug on it. Now, as you guys know, the last episode, the majority of the episode, I was actually building these hood scoops. Now, I've never done hood scoops before. This was so cool to do and it was so fun to learn how to do these scoops. And I was honestly pretty happy with how they looked. So I made them look pretty good, even though we had so many problems with the shape of this hood to make them look this way. So let me show you actually why we're pulling the plug on this. So if you remember, this first scoop is completely mocked up. The second one, I got the sides cut out, but I did not get them welded on. One of the major differences between this hood and the Cutlass 442 hood is all of this right here. You can see how this has a slight bow up and it goes all the way down. The Cutlass 442 hood is actually flat right here. As well as coming to the back, this body line right here where it curves up does not exist. So this right here, and it comes all the way down, it is flat, and the hood scoops actually just come out of the flat part. The problem is in order to make this hood look exactly like the 442 hood, I would have had to cut out all of this and put a huge flat patch in just to make it look exactly like it. So I pretty much had to stick with the shape of this hood and just try and match the scoops to these curves right here. And you can see, I mean, it really doesn't look that bad. I honestly really like them, but my buddy did not like them. So the main difference between the Cutlass 442 scoops and these scoops is I had to make these scoops just a little bit taller just because I had to match this shape right here. So if I made them shorter, you can see how the back of it starts to kind of lay out. I had to do that to match that curve back there of the hood. So if I brought it any lower, it would have looked flat and it really wouldn't have looked good. So we kind of met up and talked about this for a while and just decided to pull the plug on it. So I ate all of the labor and all of the materials in this, but my client has been super good to me, and honestly, he just wasn't happy with how these were coming out, and so I decided to take it off of his bill. But sometimes that's just how custom work goes. You kind of have to modify it until you like it, and it does get expensive. So I'm gonna be cutting these hood scoops back off the car today, and we are just gonna be running the stock Cutlass hood. Okay, now that the hood scoops are cut off, I'm going to unbolt this hood. We're gonna take it outside and I'm going to completely strip the outside of this hood. I wanna get this hood all the way down to bare metal just because of how many layers of paint are on this hood. Once any material you put on a car starts to get too thick, you will start to have cracking issues. And not only that, any of the old paint isn't good to put all of our new materials over the top of. So it's best to go all the way down to metal, that way you take care of any problems that may arise, and then starting with a good metal surface, you can build up from there. So if you remember on this hood, you can see all of the cracks right there. That's how this entire hood was, and look how many different layers of paint there was on this. I mean, there's at least 3 or 4 different layers. There was this first green layer, and then there was this light blue, a dark blue, there was a purple right here, there was another, this looks like mud, primer, and then the red. So, I mean, this has a couple different paint jobs on it. It's just too thick, and that is why I think it is cracking. Not only that, I saw a lot of it flaking up as I was stripping it, so that means that it wasn't prepped correctly, and the paint didn't stick. So I got a surface conditioning tool from Harbor Freight that I'm going to use to strip this, but I'm gonna grab this hood, take it off. We're gonna put it outside, that way I don't make a huge mess out of the garage, even though it is pretty messy already. So I'm gonna throw this outside, get this stripped, and then we will be on to the next stage. Holy crap, guys, that was so much work. There were so many layers of paint on this that, I mean, probably at least 5 layers of paint that I had to go through, all the way down to the bare metal. Now, to get most of the paint gone, I actually used this tool right here from Harbor Freight. It's called a surface conditioning tool. And what it does is it pretty much has a disc that just spins and tears up the paint as you go. I really like to use this on a lot of my panels. Now, what you have to be careful with is warping the panel. This is gonna get it hot because as you're sanding, it's gonna create heat. If you get the metal too hot, it will start to warp. So it'll start to stretch, and then you'll have an issue, what is called oil canning, which means your metal is stretched so that it moves around and it's not in one spot. Now, flat panels are extremely easy to warp just because they are so flat. All of these body lines help kind of make the panel a little bit more rigid, so you can push a little bit harder. And if you noticed, as I went in the middle, I was really light with it. Once I got most of the paint off, I just barely bought this DA from Harbor Freight actually, and the sandpaper worked absolutely amazing. I think honestly just as good as 3M. And I just went over everything with 80 grit and stripped the rest of the spots, especially here towards the middle, because I really didn't want to warp this. If you do warp it, it's not the end of the world. You can fix it, but it's just extremely difficult, so it's just better not to warp it. If you're stressed that you're going to warp it, just buy a DA and strip the whole thing by hand with your DA. It'll take a lot longer, but you won't risk warping your panel. But would you check that out? The hood is completely stripped and we're pretty much ready to take it back inside. But man, I'm lucky that it didn't snow on me today. It's about 30 degrees outside here in Utah right now, and I've been out here for about 4 hours now and I am freezing. So I'm gonna get the hood and get everything back in the garage and get warmed up. Okay, it's a new day. Hood is back in the garage. Let's take a look at it. So all of the paint is off of the hood. I went around and got as much as I could. I really didn't get in here because I'm probably not gonna strip this, just because this doesn't matter, it's gonna get covered. But other than that, everything looks good. There's not really a ton of surprises, a couple dents we gotta fix, but with just a little bit of work, I'm gonna be able to get this hood knocked out and get this car one step closer to epoxy. So just to tell you a couple of things I gotta do quick. These are eyebrows that go on the front of the fenders. We're actually gonna paint these. My buddy bought these brand new. This side over here has a big dent right here. So I'm gonna have to repair that and then make sure all of this fits up nicely and looks really good. After that, I have to pull off both of the fenders, because this fender, I have to come behind here. That's why I have this taped right here. And I have to beat the back of this in because the door gets really close now that we're panel matching this. And I need to make clearance so that it will not hit. And then once those couple things are done, I really think we're gonna be close to disassembling this car, which is insane. So I can't wait to show you guys what's next with this car, but as for now, we're gonna get started on those couple of things that I just mentioned. So the first thing that I did was pull off the driver hood hinge and then pull off that driver fender just so I could see the back of it and see kind of what I had to do to make clearance for the door. And then next I decided to jump to the eyebrow on the passenger fender. So I just had to do a couple slits, weld in a couple patches just to bring that out and make that eyebrow fit really nice. Once that eyebrow was finished up, it was time to jump back to the driver fender and finish making the clearance for the door. Now, you would never have to do this on a stock OEM restoration, but since we tightened all of our gaps and we are going to be panel matching everything, you have to make sure that everything will clear and it will not hit. And you have to do this while it's in metal, because you can't do it in body and you can't do it in paint. So make sure to take your time, make sure it's all done in metal, it all lines up really well, the gaps look good, the clearances are good, because like I said, you cannot fix this in body. So your build's going to turn out so much nicer if you just make sure it's all good in metal and then move forward from there. So driver fender was finished, so I put it away and pulled off the passenger fender. The passenger fender definitely didn't need as much work as the driver fender did, but there still was a little bit of metal work that I had to make sure that I took care of on the back of the fender, and then I DA'd the panel in 80 grit just to get all of the rust and oxidation off of the exterior of the panel. Alrighty guys, we are moving along. Front end is completely disassembled on the Cutlass and it is ready for CRE. Now I have to get this thing completely torn down and everything sanded and prepped and ready to go, and make sure all of the metalwork is completely finished before we move on to the next step. So next step, now that the front end is off, is doors. I'm gonna get the doors pulled off. I'm gonna flip them over, make sure that everything is ground, all of the holes are filled. And then what I'm doing is I'm using my DA sander, just going over the outside of the car. So I'm gonna go over the outside of the doors and just kind of freshen up the metal a little bit. This is just to get the profile of the metal a little bit smoother, and then we will be acid washing this. So I'm gonna get the doors off, get them finished, get them DA'd, and then move to the deck lid, get that off, and then it will be time to get the body done.
So we are in the home stretch. This part takes so much time just because you're doing all of this finishing work and there's so many little things that you don't really notice at the beginning. But as you're doing your final inspection over the panel, there's just so many little things that you have to take care of and it all just adds up. So I actually found a couple rust spots on the back of both of the doors. There were 2 spots on the passenger door that I actually fixed right there. And then once I finished with that door, I pulled off the other door and found a couple spots on that door as well, which is okay. I'm gonna get everything fixed in metal. I really want the metal to be as good as it can be before I put a epoxy primer over the top of it. Not only do you have to focus on the metal being ready for epoxy primer, you have to make sure that you take off everything. Hinges, strikers, latches, everything inside the door. They have to be completely disassembled for epoxy primer. I know it's a lot of work, but honestly, it's just worth it and it's gonna make your build turn out so much better in the end. And honestly, if you're paying a shop to work on your car, you can take it apart. You really don't need that many tools. You only need a couple sockets, ratchets, wrenches, and you can pretty much disassemble the entire thing and save a lot of money.
Okay, so trunk is off, both of the doors are off, and the front end is completely disassembled. I have a couple of things left to do, really 2 things left. I have to go over the body, make sure the body is completely ready for epoxy primer, and then I have to unbolt all of the body mounts and lift the Cutlass off the frame and put it on the car.
So I jumped underneath the car and there are 8 body mounts or body bolts that I had to disconnect. That way the body would separate from the frame once we took it outside to lift it up. After that, I jumped onto the roof and I sanded it in 80 grit. I also sanded the quarter, stripping all of the E-coat off that new quarter that I put on because you never know what is underneath that E-coat. So you're going to want to make sure you strip it all off, all the way down to bare metal, and then it will be ready for epoxy primer.
Alrighty, Cutlass is out of the garage and it is outside because now in the dark I have to get the Cutlass body up off the frame. I just barely finished building my body cart, which I don't know if you can see it all the way over there from Jegs, but I'm gonna work on getting the body up off the frame right now. We're gonna get the frame slid back all the way into the shop and then throw the cart underneath the body so we can roll it around and get it inside the enclosed trailer.
So at this point it was a little bit past midnight and it was really nice that my dad was still awake because he was actually able to help me get the body off the frame, which is a huge help. It's really nice to have a second pair of hands. We're actually getting pretty good at this. So just lifting the body with the jacks, rolling the frame out from underneath it, and then throwing my brand new Jegs cart underneath it that we can roll the body in and out of the enclosed trailer. I had to buy this cart just because my rotisserie would not fit with the car on it inside the trailer.
Okay, Cutlass is inside and you can see it is on my Jegs body cart. So super nice. This thing rolls so good. So I'm almost done metalwork wise with the Cutlass. Pretty much the last thing I have to do is just go over the body, make sure everything is good and up to par, and that will be it. And then get this thing loaded in the trailer and take it down and get it epoxied. So I'm gonna go over everything, start with the firewall and kind of just work my way back and really just hit any spots that I need to, make sure everything is sanded and prepped and ready for the epoxy primer.
I had already gone over the roof and the quarters, but I did not go over the firewall. So I got a wire wheel disc on my grinder and went over all of the old seam sealer just to get everything off and everything clean because I really want the epoxy job on this to look nice.
Okay, all of the metalwork is finished on the Cutlass body, finally. I went over all of the old seam sealer and got it dug out with the wire wheel, and then went ahead and went over all of my welds, finished dressing all of the welds underneath, and now the body is completely finished. So I'm gonna back up the trailer right now. We're gonna push this thing in the trailer, get all the parts loaded up in the trailer, and then this thing will be off to epoxy.
So it was about 2:30 in the morning right now, and we finally made it. I backed the trailer up and got the Cutlass loaded into the back of it. I was gonna leave really early the next morning. I think about 5 a.m. is when I left, just so we could get an early start on it the next day. So once we got the body inside, we strapped it down and then threw the rotisserie in next to it, and then all of the panels went in. Luckily, this trailer is just big enough that I was able to fit everything. Both doors went inside the car, both fenders were able to fit core support, deck lid. The only thing that I couldn't fit inside the trailer that I actually had to throw in the back of my truck was the hood. But I'm so grateful my dad stayed up with me because if I had to do this by myself, it literally would have taken me till 3-4 o'clock in the morning to finish.
Alrighty, but that is pretty much it for the Cutlass build in today's video. Got a lot done. The Cutlass is in the trailer. We are actually at the paint shop right now. We're gonna get ready to epoxy this thing, so that'll be in the next video, so be sure to stay tuned for that. We're gonna be acid washing and epoxying the car finally. It has been a long journey, but we are about to make some huge changes to this car, so be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next one where we epoxy the Cutlass. See you guys next time. Peace out.